The Institute for Faith and Freedom at Grove City College presents Liberty Mail with the Student Fellows of Faith and Freedom.
Welcome back to the Liberty Mail podcast. I'm Ashby Abernathy, and today I have the pleasure of hosting Dan Bartkowiak, who's a GCC alum and the Chief Strategy Officer for Pennsylvania Family and spokesman for the Truth on Weed Project, who's here to deliver a lecture later tonight called The Truth on Weed. So today I was hoping we could just talk about a little bit into the weed stuff and discussing the Christian response to that and what Christians ought to do in interacting with this issue. So to those unfamiliar with the PA Family Institute, can you share with us about the work that the Institute does and works to achieve?
Absolutely, and good to be here with you, Ashby.
Yep,
it's good to have the conversation. And, with the organization Pennsylvania Family Institute, I've had the pleasure of serving on their staff really since college for me. And so it's just a great group of individuals that are really seeking what is best for families. There's a network of organizations, they call it family policy councils. So a variety of states, over 40 states, have state-based organizations that work to engage with political issues, engage in different programs. We do things with regards to trying to help kids find the best education option for them. We do a youth leadership conference over the summer, so there's different programs, but especially our office is just a couple blocks away from the Capitol in Harrisburg. So we engage our elected officials on a variety of policies that we would find either that are going to help families or hinder some of the growth of families. So we speak into those, try to help families be aware of what's happening, even just at the Capitol. We also have a law center. It's called the Independence Law Center. So we engage particularly with religious freedom. The attacks that we see so often when it comes to living out your faith, whether that's in school, your employment, there's certainly a variety of areas where our faith can come into conflict with the world around us. And so we have a great team of attorneys that look to protect some of those First Amendment freedoms. So there's a variety of things that we get engaged upon ultimately to try to see Pennsylvania and really kind of the nation as a place where God is honored, religious freedom flourishes, families thrive, and life is cherished.
No, it's really good, yeah. And I can definitely say, having worked in the Senate over the summer and hearing about you guys through there, you guys definitely are making an impact. So it's good to have you here back at Grove City, especially looking forward to your lecture tonight. So branching off of that, would you care to discuss what things Christians need to know about the dangers of marijuana and why we as Christians have a duty to push back against it?
It's a great question. And really, I think to begin even the conversations, whether Christian or not, it's just understanding what today's marijuana is like. Back when I was on campus here, it was about 20 years ago, when you look at what marijuana is, at that time, the THC level, so the psychoactive component that essentially gives you the high as part of marijuana, was low-digit THC levels. You're talking 3%, maybe 5% THC, whereas today, smoking marijuana, it can be 20, 30% THC. And also 20 years ago, vaping wasn't around. You didn't have vape cartridges. They weren't invented yet. And so today you see concentrates, edibles, where the potency is 60, 70, 80, 90% THC. And that's a significant difference than what we have seen, the Woodstock weed days, and again, even just from a few decades ago. So the elements that we see of marijuana, the products that are really commercialized in states experimenting with legalization for a recreational use, they're just so different than any time in our history. And that's having a significant impact. When you look at the high potency levels, it is having issues with regards to addiction. Yes, it can be addictive. We're seeing mental health problems. You look at states when they commercialize and to have, essentially more pot shops than Starbucks and McDonald's combined in these states. That has an impact when it comes to young adults and children. It has an impact with regards to traveling and safety on the roads. So there's a variety of areas that it impacts. I appreciate one group, the Centennial Institute. They're part of the Colorado Christian University. And so really, as a Christian, let's dive into this issue. We may know people that are using marijuana. What is the impact? What is the societal impact? I think if we if we care for others, if we love our neighbor, we want to know, okay, what's a change in policy going to do to society? And so an example that the Centennial Institute did is they did a study to look at, okay, what are the impacts that this will have? And they found that for every dollar in marijuana tax revenue, $4.50 in cost. And that's in a variety of areas when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to, frankly, a rise in homelessness. Just more are impacted in that area. Again, travel, safety on the roads. There's a variety of environmental concerns. There's so many areas that it can impact that we should be careful when we look at a change in healthcare policy. What will those kind of problems arise? What will we see in a state that changes that type of policy? And I think there are those variety of areas where particularly the high potency THC is impacting. We want to have compassion to folks, like even dealing with homelessness. It's like, yes, we want to help people, but when we have a policy that expands and has more people impacted by something like that, we should have some more pause, or at least, again, that analysis. In Pennsylvania, I haven't seen, legislators looking at the costs of this. They often point, how much revenue? And I've heard revenue claims all over the place. It's somewhat easy for them to do that, but okay, let's assess the cost. Let's assess, what is the impact on law enforcement? What is the crime going to be? Is it going to be impacted? So a lot of those questions should be asked, and I think if you have really a biblical worldview, you should be caring for the world around you and asking those types of questions. And I think the answers often lead to saying this is not something we should be encouraging more use, more addictive use of this drug.
Yeah. Would you say there's moral dangers involved with that too, just being a Christian? And if marijuana is something that's like brought into your life, participating in that, would you say there's a moral pitfall there too? And maybe could illustrate that a little bit for us?
No, that's a great question. I think we should be wrestling with this issue. I even to take a step back, I know John Piper is one that has often pointed to this, but with this being such a recent phenomenon really in history, Christians and the church really hasn't thought about this much. It's always been, it's because it's illegal. And it's okay, we just don't need to go there because it's an illegal drug. And so now obviously with changes in policy, it's now like, okay, is this wrong? Is it wrong for me to use? Can Christians use marijuana? What if it's for a medical purpose? And so these questions really should be addressed by Christians, and we're almost trying to play catch up now by understanding it. And so I think there certainly are the claims when we see throughout Scripture when it comes to intoxication and being of sound mind. You look at from Romans, there's a variety of areas when you look at intoxication. I appreciate a gentleman, Dr. Todd Miles. He wrote a book, Cannabis and the Christian, what does the Bible say about marijuana? And he makes a good point of saying, we can't just kind of look through where the Bible talks about alcohol and just substitute marijuana. Like I think, taking what Scripture says, I don't think we should do that. But what are the effects of alcohol? Why do we do it? Is it, because we're losing our cognitive, notion? Are we not able to make good decisions? You look at the impact of being drunk, what does that look like? And so often you can see the use of marijuana, and particularly I'd say the high potency, the same effects that we see with alcohol. And so, there is certainly to a degree we can look at what the Bible says is to avoid intoxication and not be drunk. A lot of those effects can be similar to what marijuana use is. And then certainly being of sober mind, I think, again, you can make the connection, again, because of the high potency, what it's doing to people's minds. I think there is a connection that you can say we need to be staying away from this type of drug because of what it's doing to your mind, what it's doing to your body. So sadly, there's growing amount of evidence that is showing more families being harmed by this, particularly even just mental health concerns. There is a rise in schizophrenia, psychosis, these types of harms that we're seeing because of the mind-altering aspect of marijuana, and particularly that high potency. So I think we're seeing the impact that this can have, and I think drawing upon Scripture, we can see similarities when it comes to alcohol to be opposed to the use of a mind-altering drug. And then I'd say, too, just again, in terms of loving your neighbor, what we see with commercialization I don't think is healthy when we see what it's doing to increase more use of the drug, to see more people harmed. So I think from a biblical nature, there's the personal, like what this is going to do to your body, but then also what the commercialization is doing to others. And I don't think that's loving our neighbor when we're trying to encourage more use of a high-potency marijuana product.
Yeah. And then you kind of touched on this. Who is largely the one pushing for legalization of marijuana, specifically in PA? Is it a public opinion that we want it, or is it more companies looking in to get into the legalized sector of marijuana? But who's the one really pushing this?
It's a great question. I often, and you having familiarity at the Capitol, in the senator's office, so I've often gone over to the Capitol. There'll be a variety of rallies. There'll be a host of things that happen. I mean, you got things for Hershey's, having candies, to mascots are there. I've seen all kinds of things there. And I think if we take a step back, in 2016, that's when Pennsylvania passed the medical program. And really, I talk with legislators, and so often what I hear is the reason they voted yes for it, the majority of lawmakers said yes to it, is because families were coming in and seeing their son that had epilepsy and seeing how marijuana is helping that person. And so it's hard to say, to deny that family if they're seeing that health impact. And so I think that certainly was the case with regards to the push to the medical side.
Yeah.
What we see now is, frankly, it's big marijuana. It's those that are involved in these industries that want to make a profit. And it's those that are dressed in suits, guys that look like me, frankly, that are trying to lobby, the legislators into doing this. I was at a rally where literally there was a man dressed in a pot hat, kind of had weed-looking hats, and it felt like a college party, kind of thing of just we should have this because it's going to be fun for us.
Yeah.
And that's again just it's such a bad way of introducing policy. So I think there's been a shift when it comes to the marijuana use. I would rightly admit that our medical program is something that needs fixing. I think oftentimes we have a mentality where we think doctors are writing prescriptions and a specific amount and dosage of what you're getting with marijuana. And we have medical professionals that are almost rubber stamping thousands and thousands of medical cards for then somebody to just go to the dispensary and get really, frankly, whatever they want. And I don't think that's helpful when regards to trying to really kind of hone in on helping people. And so there is an aspect that this is something that I think needs fixing. With regards to the recreational use, I don't think it's recognizing the harms of today. We have those I've been at the Capitol where you've had a legislator, state rep that said this is as harmless as it gets. Former Governor Tom Wolf has said he couldn't see how anyone could see this as addictive. You have another legislator, a state house leader currently that I always remember him saying he felt marijuana, it's not dangerous, not addictive. The only thing at risk with legalization are potato chips. And alluding to the munchies, he get a laugh. It was at a rally, like he's getting a laugh out of it, alluding to the fact, using marijuana, you get the munchies. And to me, it's not a laughing matter when it comes to commercializing high potency THC. I've sadly talked with too many moms and parents that have seen a child that started using these high potency drugs, and it led to mental health problems. It led to a road down needing addiction recovery centers. It led, frankly, some to using other drugs and having overdoses and having their child commit suicide. I mean, it's serious ramifications when you, especially at a young age, start using high potency marijuana. So it's not a laughing matter. I think oftentimes people can think more of the 60s, 70s, thinking, it's this low potency. I used to do it and it didn't harm me. That's not what we're seeing today. Yes, there's some people that use it that don't have that type of mental health problems, but it's sadly rising. We're seeing too many families that are seeing the harms, particularly of that high potency. So I think we really need to look at the evidence, look at what's happening with regards to the industry that's pushing this. That, again, is putting more pot shops than Starbucks, marijuana, or McDonald's combined. You have folks that are saying it's easier to find a bag of weed than, a Starbucks latte. That's not what I want to see here in Pennsylvania and really in any state.
Yeah, absolutely not. And then we kind of talked about this a little bit, just with who in the PA government is currently pushing it. But a lot of people recently became familiar with Josh Shapiro through his brief spotlight as a possible vice presidential pick during the election cycle. And what can you share about his views on the legalization of marijuana, and what should people be more aware of what's happening in Harrisburg as this becomes more prevalent in this new session?
That's a great question. Governor Shapiro took significant time in his recent budget address to address the issue. And I think what's interesting, he pointed at reservations that he used to have by being a father of four and the former chief law enforcement officer for Pennsylvania. And what he feels is internal study, he feels like those concerns were alleviated. What I would submit, particularly with young adults and law enforcement, not only really are we seeing pushback currently to say don't do legalization, we're in the last few years even seeing it worse. Again, from a youth standpoint, there was a study done in Temple University in 2023 that showed with legalization the rise in youth use. And we know certainly if you start at an earlier age, the developing mind, the addiction rates, it certainly goes increasingly in terms of the number of kids that become addicted if they start at an earlier age. So seeing a rise in use is problematic. I think when it comes to health organizations, you have American Academy of Pediatrics, you have Christian Medical and Dental Association, you have a lot of these that are involved with regards to the healthcare system that are seeing more harm with young adults, with teens, and pushing pause really on this whole effort to commercialize. So really you see those that are involved. I was on a debate with Kate Appleman, who runs an addiction treatment center outside of Reading, PA, and she was asked about is marijuana a gateway drug, which often kind of comes up in the conversation, and she was quick to initially state we need to understand that marijuana is harmful in and of itself. Like they have more teens coming in that are addicted solely to marijuana. Like it used to be a rare thing, and now it's commonplace. That's not something I want to see get worse for our state. Sadly, that is what we're seeing, again, particularly the high potency. So I think there's a need to address the youth use. And when you look at some of these organizations that are involved in these areas saying, don't do this, we should take note of that. The same thing with law enforcement. Every law enforcement organization, National Fraternity Order of Police, saying, this is a public health concern. This is a public safety problem to push back on full legalization. Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police, Scott Bond is the head here in the state, has spoken out vehemently against the legalization and really the normalization, commercialization of this drug. We see that in states experimenting, that there are problems on the road. There are increased traffic fatalities. There are increased traffic accidents. It's why AAA is opposed. These large organizations that aren't part of the marijuana industry. They're trying to just say, hey, we're looking out for people, and showing the concern, showing that there is evidence that marijuana legalization, particularly with recreational use, is problematic and increases use of a dangerous drug. That's what American Medical Association identifies. It's a dangerous drug. American Addiction Centers, it's an addictive drug. You have these organizations that are calling out this is problematic in using this. And so by commercializing, you're getting the state involved in profiting from more addictive use. That's a conflict of interest I don't want to see in the state. I don't want to see more people harmed. So I think if you look at it from what Governor Shapiro has said, from a law enforcement and a youth perspective, if you look at the evidence, that should be saying we should not be commercializing marijuana for recreational use.
Yeah, that's interesting because one of the arguments I commonly hear is if we legalize it, it'll be safer. But from what you're telling us, it's just, it's not safe to begin with, even if it is legalized. So it's a very interesting, turning that argument on its head is really helpful.
Again, the high potency is just something people aren't understanding and recognizing. That is a significant change when it comes to what marijuana has historically been. So yes, there absolutely needs to be that understanding, a proper understanding of what today's marijuana is.
Yeah. Would you say, with so many other states shifting into legalizing marijuana that we see, or even dozens of other considering it, do you see PA being able to stand its ground against it?
That's a great question. And, here in the state, we see, the state of Florida, had a ballot initiative. That's not the process that we have here in Pennsylvania. I think it's interesting even looking at Florida. Ron DeSantis was very much against the legalization. You look at the police, order there, the Catholic Conference, Catholic Order of Bishops there, a variety of groups that were saying, hey, don't do this because they're looking at the evidence. But here in Pennsylvania, it's not a ballot initiative. We are looking at our elected officials that need to pass this policy and what I'd say is need to push back on this policy. So they are weighing in, and that's where I'd encourage folks getting in touch with your elected official, your state representative, your state senator, to point out many of the harms with marijuana use and they certainly are going to be engaging in this discussion. It's been several legislative sessions where this has been a policy discussion, and sadly, often it's the industry is influencing it. Hearings that are done that are almost denying testifiers that are highlighting many of the health harms with this. So I think there's a need to engage our elected officials, particularly because that's who's going to be engaging this issue. Are we going to have legalization of marijuana? It's a question that is in front of our elected officials, and I think if they truly look at the evidence, the answer should be absolutely not.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you, find links to PA Family Institute, any of your own personal stuff?
Yeah, no, it's Pennsylvania Family Institute. Our website is pafamily.org. And then again, our informational resource, Truth on Weed, is at truthonweed.com.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Bartkowiak. This has been Liberty Mail. Stay tuned and listen next time.
For more information on Liberty Mail or the Institute for Faith and Freedom, visit faithandfreedom.com.